we have investments separately and have investment properties. The style of property that we were looking at meant that we couldn't do this on our own, right? The price point and basically the complexity of the situation meant that neither of us on our own had the deposit or the income to go ahead with the project. Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Lighthouse Financial. I'm Michael Vincent. That's my friend James Blair. And today we're talking to you about buying a property with friends.
We're back in your life. And Michael, let me add to that introduction of us being friends. I'm insulted. Besties, I would go with. And also co-owners of property.
Co-owners of 12 properties, actually.
Yeah, we don't want the people coming for us in the comments, okay? So today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons, because as property gets more expensive, it's becoming more and more common, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, 100%. We've touched on this in the past in different episodes, but I thought today we'd do a bit more of a deep dive on it, because as the market changes, as incomes don't keep up with house prices, as interest rates go up, sometimes it is getting, or for a lot of people, it's getting harder to buy with, on their own. And in some instances, buying with friends is the right thing to do. Now, my disclaimer here, if you can do it by yourself, I will always recommend to do it by yourself or with a partner over doing it with friends. But in some instances, you got to do it to get it done.
Well, let's jump into it. So, Mike, let's start with the easy one. Why would you buy a property with somebody else that's not your significant other?
Because you can't do it on your own. Now, look, and that might be for a number of different reasons, right? You might not have the deposit. You might not have the income. You might have equity if you're going for another investment property. Effectively, what you're trying to do by bringing on another party into the application is to kind of shore up one of those two things, right? Either the income or the deposit.
So half of property is better than no property.
Half of property is better than no property in some instances. Other things you might be thinking about, you might be splitting the costs. So splitting the rates, splitting the insurances. And the other thing that you might want to look at is if you're looking on your own and you're like, I don't like any of the properties in this category, this price point, bringing someone else into the application might mean you can go to a higher price point, which is really key when you're kind of looking at investment properties and what style of property you're buying.
When people look at co-ownership in your experience, is it usually owner-occupied or is it rent vesting?
Cool. So co-ownership is different to investing with friends. Now, or co-owning with friends. Co-ownership with family very rarely works out well. Trying to unpick that is quite hard because you often have parents are at a different age and stage to the kids. They all jump in and buy the house. One of the kids wants to go buy their own house with their partner, and they can't because they're locked into the situation. The parents have stopped working. They can't get off this mortgage, right? Or one kid can get off the mortgage and the other two are stuck on the mortgage. That causes a lot of friction. Co-owning with friends is different because quite often you're at a similar age and stage. So you probably have more common alignment with your long-term goals, right? Of how long we want to hold on to this and what are we actually buying it for.
Are our goals aligned, Mike?
I think they're aligned, James.
Nice. So Mike and I have bought property together, which we should share our experience, right, Mike? Where do we want to start?
Yeah, cool. So I think probably if we go back to the reasons why we bought a property together. So James, we have investments separately and have investment properties. The style of property that we were looking at meant that we couldn't do this on our own, right? The price point and basically the complexity of the situation meant that neither of us on our own had the deposit or the income to go ahead with the project. So for us, James and I are really lucky where, although personality-wise we might be a little bit different, we have a very similar risk profile and kind of long-term goals. I didn't hear what you said there, but I bet you it was vituperative, and I'm gonna make you pay for that later. Now, we have very similar risk profile and long-term goals. So actually, for us, when we were looking at this property, we both had a discussion about what we wanted out of the property, right? And what we both want out of this property is passive income. We want to diversify our income streams away from just Lighthouse and the business and the podcast towards other forms of income as well.
Yeah, that's right. We just want to keep building. And it was interesting because one thing that you have to do in this sort of situation is you have to go through like a relationship agreement, shareholders agreement, those sort of things. And we had to talk about situations as what happens if one of us die, what happens if we disagree, all of those kind of things. And it's kind of like any form of relationship agreement, you want to have those, what is the, if it's a great outcome, there's nothing to talk about. It's what is the worst case scenario and how do we deal with it and agree to it now?
Yeah, and we'll dive into those worst case scenarios after the break. Pooling your money with friends can be complicated, but it can also be very rewarding. So if you're looking at your options and you're thinking about what you might be able to do next, and you want to have a chat to a friend, a financial advisor, to see if you can get that property, we've put the link in the show notes below. Get in touch with us today. Now, back to the episode. We definitely had to have some conversations around what happens if it all goes wrong, but what happens if it all goes right as well, because that is just as important. Let's say nothing falls over. We get 400 of these properties. We're multi-billionaires off them, but you want to sell the whole thing and I want to hang on to them. How do we exit in that strategy, right? So it is really important that you get, a shareholders agreement if you're doing it at a company like James and I did. Maybe even relationship agreements. And you're not just thinking about what is happening in the relationship between James and I as part owners of this company, but what happens in the instance that a business falls over, or there's a relationship property separation, from a personal relationship on the other side.
I knew you were about to say divorce, but I was like, how is he going to word this? So if we come back to the example of the worst case scenario, I'm married, I've got a kid, Mike's not married.
Got a cat.
Cat's expensive. Oh, yeah. Em nearly snorted in the background when he said he had a cat. Mike, some of the things in our relationship agreement that we had to talk through is if one of us died, what would happen? And pretty much we just had we have a life insurance policy for each of us, right? To buy the other one out. So then the other person, the family's looked after or the cat's looked after. It's going to have lots of food. I don't know what cats do when their owners are dead. Hannah and Cooper will be all sorted for the equity. The other piece that you need to have within there, though, is obviously values of you're buying properties. The values of the assets are changing. So what we said within the agreement is we would have an independent valuation on all of the properties to actually work it out. And the life insurance is getting a little technical. The life insurance doesn't dictate the value. The value of the properties dictates the value. The life insurance is there to help. But then if Mike has to tip in more cash, then that's what he has to do.
Yeah, 100%. So if you are thinking about this and you're thinking, what can we do to make this work? What are the next steps? The first thing I would do would be to start with the finance. Do a finance application on your own. See what you can get pre-approved at. If you already know, I can't do this, I got to go down the road with a friend. Get you and your friend in front of a mortgage advisor or financial advisor to run through your financial situation. What can we buy together? What are the implications of that with the lending? What's the best bank for us? Then you can focus your shopping and start going out to buy places.
Would you say, Mike, if somebody was like, I can buy my own, but I would prefer to buy with somebody else, like a friend.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario that's a good idea, or in all scenarios, you should just buy by yourself?
No, it's definitely case by case. There are some instances I could buy an investment property on my own. You could buy another investment property on your own. It's just that the investment property we can buy together is significantly better than each of those would be, right?
I kind of say as well, it's just more fun.
It is fun.
We have a meeting every week. We talk about what's going on. It's just a chance to hang out.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the other things though is it's not always fun, right? Sometimes we have to have tough conversations, challenging conversations around, do we want to do the same thing? Does someone have a higher risk profile than someone else? So even though we have very similar goals, outcomes, attitudes, risk profiles, there are instances where you're probably like, God, I'm doing all the work here and Mike's doing bugger all. And there's probably instances where I'm like, man, if we just got a nicer property, this would be way easier to finance, because we both lean on each other's skills, right? And for example, for me, I'm not good at organizing names, dates, appointments, registered valuations, right? Whereas James, much better at that than I am.
Yeah, you've seen him try to do the intro and butcher it, so he's not great with names.
And I sometimes have a very confrontational style of communication when I'm not getting my way. Yeah. And that needs to be worked around when we're using contractors.
Yeah. Safe to say Mike's job is to get the money, and then I do the other stuff.
I think the other thing as well is it really does take the pressure off in an investment scenario when you've got a sounding board. You know what I mean? We had a conversation this morning about something that's going on with our next project, and we're both on the same page, but it's really nice just to be able to I'm thinking this, are you thinking this? Okay, cool, we're on the same page. So it is a little bit easier. You're not there navigating the waters on your own. And for some people who are doing it on their own, having a property coach or a mentor or something can really help.
Alrighty, so that is co-ownership. Maybe for you, Might not be, but they are the pros and cons. I think, Mike, in summary, obviously if you can own a home by yourself, you get to keep all of the capital gains.
Yep.
Life is easier. That's great. But owning half a house is much easier than not owning a house at all. And investing can be fun with your buddies. So much love to Lighthouse for sponsoring this episode. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel. Please make sure to give us a review. Give us a like, and we will catch you next time.
Cheers.